Hello. How are you? I could get used to that. Very good. Morning, afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for coming. Just get my pen. This is the first day of the British presidency for November, so we're delighted to be able to take the presidency over from our very good friends in South Africa. And Ambassador Jerry Mattia has done a brilliant job in putting in a really successful programme for October, including the very important visit to the AU and other African capitals. We take the presidency over at a very important time. Tomorrow there will be a very important encounter between the outgoing Security Council presidency and the incoming one, namely the Rugby World Cup. Yesterday, the South African PR passed me a rugby ball before the Security Council session began. We'll see who gets to have that rugby ball in their seat for the month of November. But it should be a very good contest, and I'm just sorry it starts so early in the morning that we haven't actually scheduled an event for people to come and enjoy watching it. But hopefully there'll be some celebrations afterwards. One of the things we wanted to do with our presidency is slightly turn the dial round from the geopolitical to look at the effect on ordinary citizens. We want to focus on the problems of international peace and security as they have an impact on ordinary people in the countries that are on the Council's agenda and in the themes that are on the Council's agenda. And this will include, during November, chemical weapons, Yemen, Syria, Somalia and Libya. We also have an open debate on reconciliation. We want to build on the debate we held last year when we had the presidency on mediation, when the Archbishop of Canterbury came, and we want to look at what are the successful components, if you like, of reconciliation leading to sustainable peace. That's a very broad topic as far as the UK goes. We would like to focus on the importance of religious non-persecution. We all know there are a large number of minorities, particularly in the Middle East, including Christians, who are persecuted, and we, for our part, will be bringing that aspect out. But a number of other colleagues on the Security Council will want to talk about other aspects, including the role of civil society. So we will look forward to that. In line with our focus on the importance of individual stories and what international peace and security means for ordinary people, we'll invite a number of members of civil society to come to the Security Council to brief. In recent years, some of the issues, as you know, that the Security Council has dealt with includes the targeting of hospital, the use of chemical weapons, rape being used as a weapon of war. All too often, as we know all too well, perpetrators walk free and the leaders remain in positions of power. And so we want to try in our presidency to promote practical steps, A, to establish exactly what is happening on the ground in any particular case, B, to address impunity and to highlight the costs of impunity, including the impact on millions of ordinary people around the world. So we do want to give a voice to those people affected by conflict, persecution and discrimination through the choices we make about the briefers we invite to the Security Council. And we will be raising issues around the importance of respect for international law, the rules-based international system, religious persecution, attacks on media freedom and women, peace and security. And as I say, we'll look at the components of sustainable solutions to conflict through the reconciliation debate, and in all of this we'll be seeking to highlight the value of the rules-based international system with the UN at its heart. So hopefully that will give you something to ask us about. As I say, it's quite a heavy-duty month, November. There will be items on Yemen, Libya, Somalia, South Sudan, among others. And then we have a private meeting of the Security Council, so in the chamber, but sadly not open to the press, to hear a briefing from the Director General, Fernando Arias, from OPCW in The Hague. That's on the 5th of November. Reconciliation, open debate will be on the 19th of November, and the Middle East debate on Syria will be on the 25th of November. There are also some things we can say about working methods, but I know you'll want to ask questions about that, so I'll save that till we get to the questions. Thanks very much. Very happy to take questions. Sam will yes, moderate the questions.
Thank you, Madam President, for this press briefing, and we wish you the best of luck on behalf of ANCA for the month ahead.
Thanks very much.
So the current situation from Africa and Middle East reminds that of 10 years ago with the Arab Springs and the killing of Osama bin Laden. Now there are hot autumns, as they call, and the killing of al-Baghdadi. So what are the risks of this situation, and are you planning to address this situation during your presidency? Thank you.
Well, that's a very big span of issues, and I don't know that I would put the Arab Spring together with Osama bin Laden, because I think they are fundamentally two very separate issues with very separate motivations. But to the extent that ISIS remain an ongoing threat, even though the territorial caliphate has been defeated. I think that will come up in the Syria debate in particular, and the Belgians are very interested in doing a debate outside the Council, and Aria, I think, on de-radicalization, which, as we know, is a critical element of any ISIS debate. So I think it will come up in that way. But we haven't scheduled anything specific for the Council about what you say.
Please. Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I would like to ask you concerning the reports that next Tuesday there will be a signature in Riyadh of the Riyadh agreement between the Southern Transitional Council of Yemen, of South Yemen, and the legitimate government next Tuesday. Your reaction to such agreement being concluded with the help of the Saudi government? Thank you.
I think that's a very good breakthrough. I think the Saudi negotiators are to be congratulated on getting things this far. I think all the participants in that negotiations are to be encouraged and congratulated for getting as far as they have. As I understand it, we await the very final signature. I think probably when we have that, the Council will want to react and welcome it. But I don't want to preempt that. I don't want to, in English, count our chickens before they're hatched. But we will be having a Yemen session on the 22nd of November. If the agreement comes through signed and sealed before then, I think we would want the Council to say something quickly to help cement it, but we'll be able to have a fuller discussion on 22 November.
Thank you, Ambassador. You almost preempted my entire question with your opening remarks, so I'll give it a go anyway. Just as South Africa has handed over the presidency of the Council to the United Kingdom, one is pressed to ask this question about the maintenance of peace and security as it pertains to a certain rugby match, final match between England and South Africa in Yokohama, Japan tomorrow. As President of the Council, how concerned are you about what might transpire on that pitch in front of 30,000 people? And will you be ready to call an emergency session were England to capitulate?
Well, that's a very interesting question. So, violence-wise, conflict-wise, I don't expect any trouble because rugby fans are well-behaved and they're in Japan, which is a very nice and well-ordered country. However, if certain rules of the international system are broken, and I wonder if the referee is from the south or from the north, French referee, well, I think probably if England is playing, a French referee might count as if they're from the south, but we shall be watching very closely. And I can assure you that if any rules are broken, we shall be ready to take that up in whatever fora are necessary.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm Xili Zhu from China Central Television. We know that you have chosen to hold an open debate on reconciliation, which appears to be a follow-up to an open debate held during your presidency, last presidency in August 2018. I'm wondering why you are so interested in this topic and whether the UK has its own reconciliation experience to share with other countries. Thank you.
Thanks very much. We are very interested in reconciliation and mediation. I think it's a spectrum of elements that contribute to sustainable peace processes and political settlements. And we wanted to pick reconciliation because it's a theme that a lot of people on the Council and the UN membership more widely are interested in, but more importantly, have real practical experience of. So, for example, South Africa has a very strong mediation track record, and we'll be very interested in their contribution. For the UK, I think everyone thinks of Northern Ireland when we think of reconciliation, but of course the UK has been involved in many political processes around the world, and we are trying to help, for example, in Yemen. So for our part, we want to concentrate on the persecution of religious minorities, and we want to talk about the role of religious leaders, but other colleagues will bring in other aspects.
Thank you. George Baumgarten, correspondent for Jewish newspapers in North America and other media as far afield as Kazakhstan. Several short little questions. First, when is this reconciliation debate? Maybe I'm just missing it here. And second is the, pardon? Pardon?
19 November.
19th, okay.
It's down as the open debate, which means other members of the UN, not the Security Council, can also speak.
Now, is the one the following day, briefing Middle East, consultations Middle East, is that the usual Israel-Palestine meeting?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, and the meeting you have, which will deal with minorities in the Middle East, including Christian minorities, which meeting is that going to be?
No, that is the angle that we, the UK, will highlight in our intervention in the open debate on the 19th. There isn't a separate session scheduled on that.
Okay, thank you.
It's an angle that we want to push.
Thank
but
you.
You have reminded me of one thing that I missed. On the 4th of November, so Monday, we offered to the South Africans that since there was not time because of the so-called austerity measures, to have the Women, Peace and Security debate completed, we would take it on in our presidency. So on the 4th, on Monday, there will be an opportunity for the outstanding 44 members of the General Assembly who wanted to speak in that debate to do so. And, you know, I have to say, I think 44 members, they shouldn't have, we need to obviously find a way to let them speak. That's nearly 3 times the membership of the Security Council. So somehow we need to make sure that the business of the Council isn't impeded while supporting the right of the Secretary-General to make the necessary budget measures he thinks appropriate.
Thank you, Madam President. So Hezbollah announced yesterday that they shot an Israeli drone in southern Lebanon. Are you worried that the recent developments in Lebanon will affect the stability in the south? And do you have a message on that? And do you expect to address the political situation in the country when you discuss 1701 on the 21st?
Thanks very much for that. I suspect the political situation will come up. We haven't been asked to schedule anything particularly about the shooting down of the drone, nor about the political situation. But as you know, the Council takes a very close interest in developments in Lebanon, and we will be watching that very closely.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam President. I want to ask about the Muslims in China, the persecution of the Muslims in Xinjiang, and whether you're going to handle this during your presidency and since the issue was raised in the past month. Thank you.
Well, as you know, this issue has been discussed in Third Committee and also at the Human Rights Council in Geneva. We the UK, read out a statement in Third Committee on behalf of 23 countries about the situation of Xinjiang in the context of the debate on the Committee for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, which also mentions Xinjiang in their report. There's nothing scheduled in the Security Council that would provide an opportunity to raise the issue, but we will have to see what happens with our colleagues on the Security Council.
Thank you, Madam President, for the briefing. On the November 5th meeting, which is the informal, the private meeting,
yes.
Do you expect, this is on chemical weapons in Syria, do you expect the discussion to discuss both the allegations of Syria chemical weapons use and Turkish use of white phosphorus in the most recent incursion? And what do you know about that that mission that is, or investigators who are collecting evidence? Both STEF and OPCW said there was, but that there wasn't a mandate. Can you fill us in on that a little bit?
In terms of what will the private debate cover, member states will be free to raise what they like. I haven't yet seen the Director General, so I'm not sure what angle he particularly wishes to speak about, but I will see him before the debate. If a member state wants to raise the alleged use of white phosphorus by Turkish forces, they will be free to do so. As I say, I don't know if the Director General will have information ready to respond on that. I think the only thing I would say about the general issue is that chemical weapons are prohibited, and white phosphorus is not a prohibited substance in use. It can be used for smoke screens. It can't be used as an incendiary. So it's a slightly different issue, but I agree the reports and the photographs have been very concerning. I don't have any more information about any investigations into that unless David or Natalie do. But as we get information, we'd be happy to share it. But I don't have any at the moment, and I don't have anything that expressly confirms who might have used it as an incendiary, if that's what happened.
Hi, Madam Ambassador. Thank you for the briefing. My name is Ibtisam Azim from the Daily Arabic Al Arabi Al Jadid newspaper. I have a couple of questions. The first one regarding the work of the Security Council and the Human Rights Council. And the President of the Human Rights Council, Ambassador Kolisik, talked about some challenges that facing the work, the necessity of working more together. So what's your position? How do you see that you want to bring more issues of human rights into the Security Council calendar and debating? And on Yemen, is there any plan to bring people from the from member of the civil society to brief the council during the Yemen briefing? And sorry, the last question on Iraq, giving the last development and having about more than, I think, 200 people who were killed in the demonstrations in Iraq. Are you going to have any meeting to discuss the latest development? Thank you.
Well, on human rights in the Security Council, we believe that human rights are a vital component of good governance and stabilisation, and hence can be directly relevant to the maintenance of international peace and security. So we are always permissive, if you like, when the issue of discussing human rights comes up in the Security Council. But in terms of a more structural relationship between the Human Rights Council in Geneva and the Security Council in New York, we would support greater interchange between the two. The HRC is not sitting in November, so there isn't an opportunity for us to schedule that. However, I think it would also not necessarily command consensus in the Security Council because there are some members of the Security Council who don't believe human rights should be discussed. So there's nothing scheduled at the moment, but speaking for the United Kingdom, we certainly would welcome more exchanges. On your point on Yemen, we're hoping to have a civil society briefer, but we don't have a name yet. And on your point on Iraq, sometimes the Council discusses these sorts of moves towards manifestations of instability, but it's not automatic. So there's nothing scheduled on Iraq. We'll have to see how it develops. Did you want to add?
Just very quickly on Iraq. So the regular report from the UN Special Political Mission in Iraq is due on the 21st of November. Currently, our expectation is that the Council would discuss that report in December rather than in November.
Okay, lots of questions, so if we can keep them short. I'm going to go to the back for a little bit. Gentleman in the middle.
Thank you, Madam Ambassador. Stefano Vaccara, La Voce di New York and Radio Radicale in Rome. As a president of the Security Council, but also as in national capacity, if you can. It's about Libya, and it's actually connected to human rights. Just tomorrow, the Italian government is going to renew, automatically, the agreement with the Libyan government on the way the rescue operation of migrants in the Mediterranean are conducted. So the Libyan will still do what they've been doing the last year. Now, there are reports, and not only newspaper, but also official reports, that actually in the Libyan authority that should handle this, there are also traffickers, or at least they have been influenced by traffickers, and then the migrants are pushed back in what we've been seeing also on TV image about those conditions of laggers. So the question here is the Security Council going to address this problem, or how the migrants are stopped in the Mediterranean at the moment? And in your national capacity, what do you think about those kind of agreements going on with the Libyan government at the moment?
Well, I'll do the national one first. I don't know enough about the Italian government's agreement, I'm afraid, to be able to comment. So I won't comment on that. In terms of the Security Council, there's a Libya meeting on the 18th, but it's about Libya and the UN mission in Libya. So it would be open to someone to raise the migrant and human trafficking issue, but there's also a lot of other aspects of Libya to discuss. From time to time, the Security Council has discussed the migration issue as a generic issue, and it has discussed human trafficking as a generic issue. But on the whole, those issues are left to the General Assembly or the specialist committees.
Just a question in the back. Please do keep short. Oh, no, behind.
Yes, Madam Ambassador. My name is Abdul Rashid Abubakar, CABNC TV, Central Africa Broadcasting Network Operation. My question center on the attacks against ethnic Bayamulanje Tutsi in DRC, and there has been reports that about 200 civilians have been killed and thousands injured in the attacks. Over 160 villages have been set ablaze, resulting in displacement of over 200,000 people. Is there anything the Security Council will be doing on this pressing issue? There was also another report that the Congolese diaspora will be rallying in Washington, D.C. Tomorrow. on next week?
Well, there's no session on DRC scheduled in. Oh yes, there is. Sorry. Yes, there's the 13th. We have consultations on Democratic Republic of Congo. So I would imagine that will be an opportunity to discuss what you're asking about. I didn't know about the delegation arriving in DC.
Thank you. Thank you. My name is Abdul Hamid Sayam from the Arabic daily Al-Quds Al-Arabi. Madam President, I have two questions on Palestine. First, tomorrow is the 102nd anniversary of the Balfour Declaration. Do you think, in your capacity as a representative of the British Empire and in British diplomacy, does the Palestinian people deserve an apology from England for that Balfour Declaration, which created the State of Israel and displaced the Palestinian people? The second, South African foreign minister said in the Security Council, the Security Council should go visit the occupied Palestinian territories, with whoever agreed to go there. If there is a mission to visit Gaza and the Palestinian territory, would you be participating in that mission? Would you encourage, during your presidency, to have a team of the Security Council to go visit Palestine? Thank you.
Well, on the Balfour Declaration, this is a British national issue, as you raised the question. It's not for the presidency of the Security Council, but the British government made very clear at the time of the anniversary, the 100th anniversary of the Balfour Declaration, that we were proud of the role we had played to help Israel exist. At the same time, don't interrupt please, at the same time, we recognized that the Balfour Declaration had not been fully implemented and that there remained a large part of it that needs to be addressed, and that is obviously the Palestinian question. We remain in favor of a two-state solution so that Israel and Palestine can live alongside each other as sovereign equals in peace and security and prosperity. And that remains the British government's position, and that's what we join a number of our partners in working for in the Security Council. In terms of a visit to the area, there isn't a proposal at the moment. Speaking personally, I'd be very interested to go. I've visited in my role in various roles in the British Foreign Service, but I'd be interested to go with the Security Council. But whether a trip was viable or not would depend very much on all the components of the mission, and that would include going also to Israel. So one would have to prepare that quite carefully, but I certainly would not rule it out.
Thank you. My name is Inji Magdi from Al-Yawm Al-Saba newspaper. I have two questions. Number one, you mentioned that you focus on peace and security. Do you have any plans to discuss tensions between Egypt and Ethiopia over the Nile? Second question, you will focus on religious minorities in Middle East and Christian in Middle East. Does this relate to certain countries or Christian communities in the region?
There's nothing scheduled on Ethiopia and Eritrea, but that will be discussed at another point. Egypt, I'm so sorry. No, but it's still not scheduled. I've forgotten the second part of your question. Christians, thank you very much. This is the angle we, as the Brits, want to talk about under reconciliation, but other members of the Security Council will talk about different angles. So the debate itself is not about the persecution of religious minorities. That is just one angle that we will want to talk about, but other members of the Security Council have already indicated that they would like to pursue different angles. The overarching theme is to be able to talk about what makes a successful peace process, what makes a political process sustainable, what elements need to be included in that, to make something sustainable. And as I said at the beginning, we also particularly want to put a focus on the effect on ordinary citizens of all the work that we're doing in November. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you, Madam President. Sam Suzuki from NHK TV here. I'm wondering if the Security Council will have any response to the North Korean launching of projectiles, and will there be any upcoming meetings, open or closed? Thank you.
We haven't at the moment been asked to schedule such a meeting, but I imagine there will be an opportunity to discuss it at some point relatively soon.
It's me, right? Thank you, Mr. President, Madam President. The question is, do you have any schedule that for Kashmir, the Muslims get killed a lot in Kashmir, a couple months to now?
No, we don't have anything scheduled on
And what's the
Kashmir.
reason you don't discuss that? It's been asked like a couple times about that from the past and this month.
Where are you from?
I'm Syrian.
Which news agency?
Al-Madar knows.
Well,
US. Arabic. Muslim Arabic, yes.
I'm sorry, where are you from?
I'm US. Al-Madar News, Yasin Najjar, that's my name.
No, but I would like to know which media outlet you represent.
Al-Madar News.
Okay, thank you. There are a lot of issues going on in the world, and each month the presidency picks a few that are not routinely scheduled as part of the rhythm of the Security Council's business. We have not picked Kashmir because the Security Council had an opportunity to discuss it recently, and we have not been asked by any other Security Council member to schedule a meeting.
Thank you, Ambassador. Betül Yürük, Turkish News Agency, Anadolu. The Security Council will be having consultations on the 25th of November on Cyprus, which is the same days as the Secretary General is having a meeting in Berlin with the Turkish and the Greek Cypriot leaders. I'm just wondering if that's a coincidence that you're having a meeting or consultations.
It's a
on the same day.
coincidence. It's a coincidence.
A couple of follow-ups, Madam Ambassador. On Libya, is Qasem Soleimani going to be coming here and briefing, which is the 18th, I believe?
No, he'll do it by video. I think it's good that he stays in the region and then can be ready to talk to the parties.
Cost-cutting. And I note that in addition to non-proliferation, you have the Ukraine-Russia dispute in eastern Ukraine as footnotes. Is there any prospect of this being raised since there are some developments in the region?
It's always a footnote. So there's always a prospect that a member state will ask for it to be raised, probably under any other business, but there's no immediate plan for the Council to discuss.
And a third thing, I understand that the Council was considering a statement on Guinea-Bissau and the problems between the President, Prime Minister, upcoming elections. Is there any movement on that?
Well, Equatorial Guinea and the African Union are obviously very concerned about events there, and they have asked us to find time so that the Council can discuss Guinea-Bissau, probably in closed session. So we will try and do that.
Just very briefly, discussions about that potential presidential statement are ongoing between Council members.
Just ask a couple of questions. We'll go to Michelle now.
We can go till 25 past 12 because the next one's not till half 12.
Okay, got more time, so Michelle.
Thanks, Ambassador. Just a quick one. I know your open debate is still a couple of weeks away, but with your hope that people might address religious freedom along with the UK. Have any of your colleagues on the Council signalled that they might raise the issue of Xinjiang in China?
Just to be clear, it's the Brits who are going to raise religious freedom. We're not asking other people to pick that as the thing they want to talk about. We want to talk about the components of what makes certain processes successful. That's what we want to talk about. We particularly will pick the religious angle. Other people will pick other angles, and we're not asking them to favour one angle over another. I think it's possible that one of the fellow council members will, in that context, raise Xinjiang, but that's a hypothetical question. No one has actually told me that they will do that.
Thank you. Behind you, Ben, and then you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador. Alan Bulkati with RIA Novosti. Do you have a plans to invite someone of United Kingdom government officials to participate in the meetings of the Security Council during your presidency?
We would love to have one or more British ministers visit, and they would normally come, but because there's an election campaign in the United Kingdom and they have to go out and campaign in their constituencies, they may not be able to fit in a meeting to New York, very sadly. But we keep that under review with ministers' offices in London, and if we have a chance to have British ministers, they will come. They'll come as a mark of their respect for the Security Council, but also to show our support for the rules-based international system. But we'll let you know if there's any prospect of a minister coming, and if there is, I'm sure they'd be very happy to speak to the press.
Thank you, Ambassador. The private meeting on the 5th, Syria chemical weapons, why was that made private?
It's a sensitive and interesting subject on which there will be a great deal to say. We wanted to strike a balance between being able to have a meaningful and serious discussion among Security Council members and transparency. If we had it all in the open chamber, I think there'd be a lot of playing to the gallery on the part of some members, and I don't think we'd get very illuminating answers from the Director General. So we've tried to strike a balance. I recognise it means that you guys can't come. It also means it can't be broadcast. But other member states can still come. Non-council members can still come, but they need to submit a Rule 37 request. Syria will still be able to contribute.
Madam Ambassador, will you brief on the CWs after the session? Because it seems to have slipped from the radar constantly.
Probably after each session, we hope that the Presidency, i.e. us, will be able to come to the stakeout and say a few words about the session. So I expect we'll be able to say a few words about the CW session, but we will not be briefing in detail. We'll leave that to the Director General if he wants to do that. And I don't know if he does want to do that, but that would be for him.
Friend.
Hi, my name is Tatira Junaira, and I'm a reporter from Zimbabwe and one of the Dag Hammarskjöld Fellows. Just in case I missed it, you said that you're giving one of the on Monday you're allowing the peace and security in Africa on the debate on women, peace and security to happen for South Africa, which didn't take place last month. And apart from that, I see you have one other meeting on peace and security in Africa for this month. I just wanted to find out what the focus would be during those meetings.
Well, thanks for that. So there's quite a number of Africa meetings. So on the 4th in the morning, the Deputy Secretary General will brief on her recent trip. So that's the Peace and Security in Africa agenda item. Then in the afternoon, we have the continuation of the South African-inspired Women, Peace and Security debate. That's to allow all those member states outside the Security Council who didn't have a chance to speak last week to do so. Then we have troop contributors on MINUSCA. but that's a specialised meeting, if you like. Then on the 13th, we have the adoption of the Somalia resolution, and we also have a closed meeting consultations on Democratic Republic of the Congo. We have more adoptions of MINUSCA on the 14th. So and then we have Somalia again with a briefing and consultations on the 21st. So there's not as large a focus on Africa as there was in the South African presidency, but I think African issues are well represented.
Thank you very much. Linda Fasulo, I represent NPR here at the UN, and my question is regard to non-proliferation. I know it's mentioned in the footnotes, but I was wondering if there's any sense that perhaps there might be some kind of discussion or review of the status of proliferation efforts, perhaps by Iran, or if there are any countries in particular who might be interested in raising this issue.
There's nothing scheduled, and we haven't heard from any council member that they want to do that. I would remind colleagues that First Committee is going on, and also that the CD continues its deliberations. So in general terms, possibly not the Iran nuclear issue, but in general terms, proliferation will be raised in those fora.
Yes, Joseph Klein, Canada Free Press. I'm just wondering why some additional time is being devoted to Somalia this month in terms of a meeting and consultation subsequent to the adoption on the 13th of, I assume, a resolution or mandate. What specifically is the focus going to be this month regarding Somalia that merits the space that you're providing in the calendar? Thank you.
I'll let Natalie, who deals with African issues in our mission, reply, but I hope the implication of your question isn't that Somalia is not important.
No, it's not. It's not, of course, that's not the implication, but as you acknowledge, there are many important issues around the world, some of which have been raised today and are not included in the calendar. So I'm just wondering what the focus is in terms of Somalia. Thank you.
Thank you. So the adoption that's scheduled for the 13th of this month is specifically related to the Somalia sanctions regime that will be renewed. And then the briefing and consultations that we have is more of a political nature, and they will focus on the elections that will take place in Somalia in late 2020-21. Thank you.
Will the issue of Somalia land come up in terms of the issues relating to some who want to have autonomy from the rest of Somalia? I mean, is that going to be part of the focus?
It's not part of the planned focus, in that the briefers are not going to focus on that aspect. But of course, any council member is welcome to raise any aspect of the issue.
Ambassador, can you share with us maybe one or two of the questions that you're planning to ask to the director of the Chemical Weapons Organization? Would you like to share with us what's your focus or priority for you in this meeting?
Well, if I was going to share all that with you, I wouldn't have had a private meeting of the Security Council. But we have, in many ways, to not have council unity on the issue of the use of weapons of mass destruction, particularly when chemical weapons use is banned. You know, that's a very odd place for the Security Council to find itself. And we have in the past said in the chamber that we think the Russians should assume their P5 responsibilities in respect of halting and doing everything possible to halt WMD proliferation and use, including chemical weapons. And as a result of all those discussions, we had offered as the UK to try and have an interactive dialogue with the Director General at the time on the issue of chemical weapons. For logistical reasons, i.e. he couldn't leave The Hague, that wasn't possible. So we have been able to get him to come to New York this month. We're very grateful to him for being able to spare the time to do that. He's very keen to brief the Security Council on the work of OPCW. That's its investigations, its attribution, its, if you like, future programme. He'll also, I think, see the Secretary General. So it's a good move to expose the Security Council to the work of another important international institution that has a vital role to play in making sure that chemical weapons are not used again.
Okay, question in the back.
Yes, Madam Ambassador, just if you can share with us how your work has been affected and how will be affected this month by the continuous debate that there is in UK about Brexit and all the situation there. I mean, the UK diplomacy is okay, or has also a problem with that?
Well, point one, the United Kingdom doesn't have problems. It has a democratic process on Brexit, for which there's now a plan, and there will also a deal reached with the European Union, and there is also a British general election. Point two, British diplomacy is alive and well, thank you for asking, and thriving, and hopefully going to have a successful and productive presidency of the Security Council in November, underscoring our responsibilities as a permanent member. Point three, in the UN, we recognise that the UN will be an even bigger stage for British diplomacy once we leave the European Union. We want to make the most of that. We want to help the UN thrive and prosper as it comes into its 75th year. We want to keep the UN at the apex of the rules-based international system, the multilateral system, and we want to put our shoulders to the wheel on all the big issues of the day, partnering with those who don't agree with us on certain issues as much as those who do. So it's a big task, but I don't see any signs that UK diplomacy is in any way hindered by anything, to be absolutely honest, except possibly the recalcitrance of some members of the Security Council. But that was always with us.
Just take two last questions. At the front, sorry.
Thank you, Ambassador. One of the major concerns after Turkey's operation into northeast Syria was the resurgence of foreign ISIS fighters. I was wondering if the Council will have any discussions on the foreign ISIS fighters, and if you could also tell us how many British citizens there are among those ISIS fighters.
I think it's important to be clear. It's not so much a resurgence of ISIS fighters as the fighting on the ground has meant that some of the ISIS fighters who were held in camps have dispersed. So the material effect of that has not yet been realised. So obviously it's concerning. We have made very clear that we thought the operation a mistake because it took the focus off countering Daesh. I can't off the top of my head give you the numbers of British citizens, but Sam will be able to let you have the figures later. There isn't a direct peg in November for the Council to discuss the issue. It's a very complicated issue when it comes to the issue of foreign terrorist fighters, on which a number of national governments are working and collaborating. But I expect the issue at some point will come to the Council, but I don't think it's ready, if you like, to come to the Council yet.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the second question. I would like to go back to Iraq, Madam President. With regard to the violence at level that we are witnessing nowadays, Qasim Soleimani, the Iranian military leader, and he is the godfather of all the militias loyal to Iran in Iraq, has arrived in Baghdad, and since his arrival, the violent circle against the demonstrators has increased, leading to the death of 200, with the acknowledgement of the Human Rights Council of the number of dead, and thousands, actually 6,000 wounded. Since the affair is no longer Iraqi, it's really with the interference of Iran and militias that's loyal to Iran, trained and weaponized by Iran. Is there any role for the Council to play? We are not expecting the Iraqi government, which is falling under the influence of Iran, to ask for a Security Council meeting. But is there anything the Council can do?
Well, there's no scheduled opportunity to discuss Iraq, but as with any issue, any Council member can ask for any issue of international peace and security to be discussed at any point. So it's possible that at some point in November, a Council member will ask for the issue to be discussed, but it's not at the moment on the agenda.
Okay, we will do the last question.
Thank you again. I'm going back to the issue of Palestine. The human rights rapporteur on Palestine said there's nothing could be done unless there is measures to be applied against Israel. I mean, some kind of sanctions or punitive measures. Is there any country in the world or in history had escaped the UN pressure like Israel? It has been in violation of Security Council resolution, GA resolution, Human Rights Council, 4th Geneva Convention, ICJ opinion, and yet it has never been subject to any kind of punitive measures. Since impunity is in one of your issues, why there is no discussion about some kind of measures to apply it to Israel so it could submit to the international will and international law? Thank you.
Well, I'm not going to do your historical research for you. And what the Special Rapporteur says is important, and we defend the right of Special Rapporteurs to be independent, but we don't always agree with them. We all know why resolutions on Israel do not pass at the Security Council. And to be absolutely honest, I don't think it helpful to the cause of getting negotiations going or to the cause of a two-state solution to raise that issue. We will get a two-state solution only when both parties feel they can sit down at the table and negotiate seriously as equals. And that's what we really ought to be concentrating on.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much. Thanks.